You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Weston Williams, joined by Oliver Camacho and Matt Cummings. All right, this week it's a very important Hall of Fame induction for the late, great José Van Damme. The legendary Belgian bass-baritone finally breaks our streak of inductees who are either sopranos, tenors, or Georg Solti. And then Oliver Camacho's in the Big Apple to give us a field report from the Eric and Dominique Laffont competition. Who won, who lost, and who's clamoring to be the next guest here on the OBS. Stay tuned to find out the answer to at least two of those questions. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, the Met should probably not try applying for a loan anytime soon. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify. Click follow on Apple Podcasts. Hit the plus sign. You can also stream episodes of OBS every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central at amplisoundsradio.com. Email us your hot takes by writing to mailbag at operaboxscore.com or upload a voice memo using the You Got Something to Say tab on our website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you'll get an OBS beer coaster, an OBS lapel pin, and a #1 OBS fan foam finger just for sharing your own hot take. Wow. Oliver Camacho is here with us, and by with us, I mean not with us at all. He is in New York City. But that means it's just you and me, Matt.
In the interest of feeling like Al Gore on 30 Rock, I will recycle the joke about how I wanted to look up tennis scores, but I decided the work wasn't worth the bit.
Is tennis ever really worth the bit? That's what I'm always asking Oliver, and he always gets really mad at me for some reason.
Well, almost as mad as I am with his copy that ignored 2-time Hall of Fame inductee Shirley Verrett.
That is true. I'll say it. I am, in many ways, the cishet white man here, am the minority because I'm surrounded by tenors most of the time on this show. So, you know what? I'm really excited to get some lower voice representation for once in my life.
He will also be joining composer Benjamin Britten and the Carillon recording of Salome.
Was Benjamin Britten? I think he was probably a tenor. I've never heard him sing, but he has kind of a high voice, right?
I think he really was mostly a pianist.
Let's talk some opera.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, this is OBS Hall of Famer, our enthusiastic, yet humble, salute to a distinguished opera artist who has gone above and beyond to contribute greatly, distinctively, and with grand significance to the art and honor of opera.
Dusting off the Hall of Fame. It's been a while since you've done one of these. José Van Damme just died, about a month ago or so? And,
Yeah, just over a month.
We are very much on the cutting edge of all these sorts of things, so we wanted to really make sure that every single possible obituary had already been written before we added our tribute to the mix here.
You can say the real reason, which is that I famously have nothing to say about basses, and so you tried to send out as many invitations to as many people as possible who might be able to contribute more than, well, it's a bass. What do you want?
Well, once again, I do think that, we have a certain pro-tenor bias here on the program. But I do think that José Van Damme is certainly worth it.
If there's any bass and really a bass-baritone, who deserves it, it would be José Van Damme.
Well, he's got the range, like that. Some of those high notes can get pretty close, like that qualifies him by himself. Well, let's get started with sort of his bio. He was born in Nazi-occupied Brussels in Belgium way back when, which is, I'm sure, a very fraught time to be born in. He auditioned for his voice teacher as a male alto and enrolled in the Brussels Conservatory after his voice changed. My favorite fun fact about him is the fact that, while he was in school at the conservatory, he was actually a nightclub singer for a little while. And I don't think there are any recordings of him, but God, if someone can find them, please let us know. He was under the alias José Diamant. Would that be just José Diamond?
Diamant. But yes,
Diamant.
it is French for diamond.
Honestly, the name, I think, really makes it.
Saint-Diamant, am I right?
So let's start off with kind of his career, other than the nightclub stuff.
So he changes his stage name from José Diamant to José Van Damme and makes his opera career in Liège, not just for waffles, as Don Basilio in Rossini's Barber of Seville. That's in 1960, when he's a wee slip of a thing at 20. The very next year, though, he becomes an ensemble member at the Opéra Nationale de Paris and appears there regularly from 1961 through 1965. And we're going to throw it over to the man, the myth, the legend himself, so you can hear a little clip of the role that really was his first signature role. And I don't need to say anything more. You're going to know what role I'm talking about.
Seigneur, Seigneur, car avec les soldats, mille parvenos peuvent s'entendre. Pour plaisir, ils ont des combats. Le cirque est plein, c'est jour de fête. Le cirque est plein de l'automne. Les spectateurs perdent la tête. Apostrophe, crise et tapage, poussé jusqu'à la fureur, car c'est la fête du courage, c'est la fête des gens de cœur. Allons, regarde, allons, songe au combattant, que l'œil noir te regarde, et que l'amour t'attend, toréador, l'amour t'attend.
José Van Damme recorded Carmen more than once, but that is from probably the most famous of those recordings, the 1973 Solti set with Tatiana Troyanos on it as well. Escamillo became a real calling card role for him. It was also the role he sang when he debuted at the Met, Covent Garden, and La Scala.
It's kind of interesting. If you look at his early career especially, he has this very typical sort of, I don't want to say standard, because vocally his voice was great from the very beginning. But he has a very sort of standard sort of beginning. And then once his voice gets a little bit larger, into the late 60s and 70s at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, and, when he started, working with Herbert von Karajan especially, he started to get a lot more, I think, picky and choosy about his roles. And one of the things he would often say is that he would prefer, Wagner, Strauss roles because they had the words mattered more, right? He was very much about the sort of complex characters that you really only get if you're a bass baritone in the German-speaking world.
Although weirdly, he found the Mozart roles that he did, especially Figaro and Leporello, were his two calling card Mozart roles. He considered them to be just as complex as those German romantic heroes and villains, and more complex than any, especially Verdi, and then even more so bel canto role, where the words are kind of superficial and it's more about the feelings and the vibes.
He didn't equate harmonic complexity with psychological complexity, and he really seemed to prefer both in his go-to roles. And along those lines, I want to play a clip from the one of the 12 recordings he made with Herbert von Karajan. This is from Flying Dutchman. One of the things I love about this rendition of Die Frist ist is that it really feels almost like a lead. It doesn't feel like a Wagner piece. Everything is so smooth and gentle and connected to the words that are being sung. Here's just a little bit of that.
Das auf dem Land ich suchte, sich es finden. Euch, es hält mir's Bluten, bleib ich getreu. Bis eure letzte Welle sich bricht. Und euer letztes Nas versiegt.
From the 1984 recording of Flying Dutchman with Herbert von Karajan, you can really hear how tender the voice is in a lot of these lines, especially in the quieter moments. When a lot of other singers sing Dutchman, there can be often like a harshness to it. They're really leaning into the storm part of the Sturmendrang, you know. One of the things about José van Dam is that he always has this gorgeous tone. A lot of similar Flying Dutchman, some Dutchman recordings are very much, they're grittier. They have an edge to them.
The Bayreuth bark, I think they call that.
he doesn't sound like a force of nature so much as someone having nature thrust upon them, so to speak. And you know, there's a quality physically to his voice, and there's probably like a singer term for this. But he has this like really even assured vibrato that really reminds me of like a little, you know, like when you blow a whistle and it has like the little like cork ball in it that bounces around. It's got this like constant pressure and velocity just hitting the sides and never exceeding the limits of what he can do. For some singers, I feel like, you know, that means that, you know, like, oh, that's kind of a boring way to do it. You're never really testing it, but he's so connected to the psychology of the character that it never gets boring when you're listening to him sing.
Yeah, no, I definitely know what you talk about, that there's this like there's this false dichotomy of if you're going to delve into like these the deep opera queen texts that you might find like in the archives of Parterre Box, rest in peace James Jordan, you will find people arguing about the difference between Stimmdivas and Kunstdivas, so like voice divas and art divas. That you would necessarily have to give one up if you were going to excel in the other one. And again, I mean, part of this is going to be my tenor bias saying like, well, sure, it's easier to do that when you are a bass and your instrument doesn't require you to have the same like physiological high wire act that tenors especially and also sopranos like are confronted with acoustically from like what vowels can you even hear at that range of frequency. Like it's more, it's about more than just human physiology even. And so like it helps that he was a bass baritone, but it really, to say that, I mean, I say that kind of with a wink and a nod, because I don't want to take away from his artistry at all, in that he had a real understanding of how his voice worked and what roles were going to be a good match for him, both not just psychologically but also vocally.
Yeah.
And what was gonna and how to use his strengths to bring the best performance of that character to life on stage and in the recording booth.
He talks a lot about the recording booth too. He really enjoyed being recorded in a studio environment. Matt and I, before we started this podcast, we were reading an interview with him, and he said he was not so interested in just a live recordings, because he just felt they were just documentations. But in the recording studio, he was very much more engaged with, kind of like we talked about with the Georg Solti Hall of Fame, where the recording itself is part of the expressive power of the opera.
The medium is the message, Marshall McLuhan would say.
Exactly. Here's a quote. He says, "Recording is a very special thing. When you've sung the roles on the stage and then you are in a studio with a microphone, you must essentially create your intensity from scratch. You have to give more intensity in a recording than you do on the stage. On the stage, you're acting. People can see you act. In the recording, you can't physically act, and the people can't see you, so you have to give more with your voice." And that's something that you can really hear, especially in a lot of his studio performances, is that he is really hyper aware of what the final product is going to be. If you're going to hear José Van Damme in a live performance, you are going to be getting a slightly different José Van Damme than if you're hearing him over, on one of these studio albums. And you will also get a different performance if you're in one of the couple of movies that he did. He did the 1979 Don Giovanni, and he was also in an Oscar-nominated movie, I believe, in the 90s, which I have not seen. I've seen a couple clips from it, but
no, we need Oliver on here to talk more about the musique claire.
We do, but like he has this awareness of what physically needs to be done at every different type of performance, but he also knows that the emotional requirements for each one differ as well. You can really hear, especially in the clip we just heard of the Flying Dutchman, some of those, quieter moments I kind of doubt would be as, legible in a live setting. But because he is singing with the microphone in mind, he can really access that in a very real, direct way, in a way I think that a lot of singers struggle with. I think there are plenty of singers out there who I don't think record very well.
No, some of the most popular ones even.
Yeah, I think, for years and years and years, I was questioning why people liked Piotr Beczała, right? Until I heard him live. And I'm like, oh, I understand now. And he doesn't even necessarily record that badly, but when I hear him on recordings, I was wholly unimpressed. But live, I'm like, this is a completely new thing. But that's not the case for someone like José Van Damme, who is really conscious of every performance, no matter how it's being done, must be done within certain parameters. And it's all about this idea of control and intelligence behind the voice,
which makes it sound, I think, a little bit more manipulated. And that, if you were to just describe that in isolation, without the other parts of it, of his artistry, without his generosity of tone, without the richness and the velvetiness and like you said, evenness from top to bottom, and his the depth of his character interpretations, that can come across as precious or manipulated, and I don't really think it does with him. My experience with every Van Damme recording I can ever think of listening to is you breathe a sigh of relief because you're in good hands. Know he has you covered. He's gonna hit all of the highs and lows of the role. That it's never gonna sound stressful or stretched outside of his comfort zone. That speaks to how versatile he was as a singer to be so authoritative in so many different idioms. And also the luck of when not that he was lucky to be born in Nazi-occupied Belgium, but that he was lucky to be born in 1940, so that he was at the peak of his career, kind of at this golden age, at the tail end of the golden age of these big studio box set recordings.
Yeah.
That no one has money or resources or market share for anymore. Just like a small excerpting of his discography is like, you have the Solti Carmen, which has Troyanos and Domingo and Kiri Te Kanawa on it. You have the Solti Verdi Requiem with Leontine Price. You have the Hall of Famer Herbert von Karajan Salome with Hildegard Behrens. You have Karajan's Peleus and Melisande. You have Karajan's Parsifal, which in 1980 won the Grammy for Album of the Year, where he plays on Fortas, and that is a portrayal that is like named as the authoritative take on Fortas.
We also have the second Karajan Carmen,
the Agnes Balza one, which I love.
Yeah. We've got the Neville Mariner Nozze di Figaro, the Lorne Mazel Don Giovanni, which was this part of the film, or is this different?
It's the soundtrack to the film.
I gotcha.
The Joseph Losey film in 1979 with who else is in that? Ruggiero Raimondi and Etta Moser and Kiri Te Kanawa.
And of course, speaking of Hall of Famers, I believe when we were talking about Frau Neschatten with Harry Rose and myself for like 4 straight episodes, we were exclusively using recordings from the Solti Frau Neschatten, which features José Van Damme, and that's for a reason.
As Barak the Dyer, right?
Yeah.
That with who else is on the recording? That's like Hildegard Behrens and Julia Vardi.
Yeah, it's such a good recording.
He's on like one of the few recordings of Massenet's Don Quixote, which was the role that he said farewell to the opera stage in 2010. He's on a number of like important alternate versions of operas that don't have necessarily one definitive version, and so that's the French Don Carlo that Antonio Pappano made, as well as the Kent Nagano Les Contes d'Hoffmann, which is a totally reworking of the score since that was unfinished at his death.
Right.
Like, these are all recordings that are worth listening to once, twice, more than once. Like, not every second round Karajan recording is necessarily like worth a listen, but any of them that have José Van Damme on them are.
Truly. I mean, like, he's always a highlight. And it's, when we're talking about like the control and stuff, when I was trying to figure out how to talk about José Van Damme, I kept on coming up with words like control, restraint, things like that. And I'm always, and like, wow, how am I going to like get across the fact that he wasn't boring? You know what I mean? Cause like control, restraint, making sure that everything is in order and really like kind of thought about in a very like actory kind of way where it can sometimes lead to like really plodding performances. And then I'm like, what are we doing? He's been so well recorded. It's so easy to be like, I can prove he's not boring because listen to any of those recordings and you'll know. And
I think this is a perfect time to play our next clip, where you're going to hear not just that absolute, I think maybe more than control, the better word for it is command of his arsenal.
Yeah.
But also like, he is not afraid of cutting loose. This is the very beginning of the Johanna on confrontation scene from his studio recording of Salome.
That clip makes this a double Hall of Fame.
So really, José Van Damme is joining Shirley Verrett as two-time Hall of Fame inductees. As you may recall, we did one for her, the singer, and one when we were briefly a video podcast for her cape work. She is the Hall of Fame cape artist.
Wow, this is a high honor. Shirley Verrett's cape.
To be mentioned in the same rarefied air. And much like Shirley Verrett, José Van Damme similarly had just an immense repertoire of roles that he performed throughout his career. A small segment, excerpting of that we've already done. We've talked about Escamillo. We've talked about the Mozart servants, Figaro and Leporello. He sang other Mozart. He sang other in Wagner. He sang Hans Sachs and the Dutchman and Amfortas. And he never would sing Talramund, and he would never sing Wotan.
Yeah.
Not for him. Not for him.
No, he thought they were too almost too heroic, right? You know, he wants the psychological depth, which means that he did do things like Wozzeck, right? You know, something that's a lot of similarly voiced bass baritones wouldn't really touch because they're like, oh, I want to sound pretty, I want to do this. But he understood the artistry of something like that. And of course...
Or something like Peleas that takes a ton of musicianship and a real gift for the French language to be able to paint this impressionistic picture where you're never really sure what is happening.
And he wasn't just doing deep psychological brooding studies all the time. He would also do comedy as well. He started off
as Falstaff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he started off with more of an actual bass range. He did Mephistopheles and Philip II, and then by the end of his career, he was going up into more purely baritone parts.
He did Love for Three Oranges. He did L'Espagnol. He did roles in many, many different languages, all almost equally idiomatically, which I think is really interesting because as a Belgian,
so fascinating, right?
he was a native French speaker, but a lot of times you will find that people who are native French speakers from France don't necessarily sing well. I've had teachers and coaches who have made this observation to me in the past, and it's true. It's really hard to think of a counterexample. And so there's kind of a theory that's out there that I think has some credence, which is the way French language sits in French people's mouths is not necessarily conducive to tapping into the resonance that you need to be a really vocally endowed opera singer. It's not that they are not good singers, or definitely not that they're not interesting artists, but I mean, think about Denise Duval. She's Poulenc's muse, but not for her voice. For everything else, that she brought to music. And I think that many native French speakers kind of fall victim to that in a way that isn't necessarily true of native speakers of French from other countries, who have other linguistic and cultural influences as well. Correlation, causation, yada, 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 nothing scientific here. Don't at me, but I don't not stand by it.
You can cancel Matt if you really want. It's good for engagement. But I do think that there is something to that. I mean, certainly sung French and spoken French are two different beasts. And even aesthetically, French is a different beast, when you're talking about the era of the repertoire.
Right. And it has to do with the way you handle consonants. It has to do with the way you handle legato.
Well, even on a story level, for example, José Van Damme himself, didn't ever want to do, Faust, by Gounod because he just didn't find it particularly interesting.
He much preferred the Berlioz Faust, which I think he's probably the first person to say that other than
in the history of all time. But I do think that it is, very interesting, especially when you consider that probably his most, maybe not his most iconic role, but certainly his most iconic premiere was for a French opera, which would, of course, be St. Francis of Assisi, or Saint François d'Assise, I suppose is the pronunciation, by Olivier Messiaen. And now, we don't talk a lot about Messiaen on this podcast for the simple reason that he only wrote this one opera.
And it's 5.5 hours long.
And it's 5.5 hours long, and it's weird. I love it, unsurprisingly.
Shocker.
In fairness, like Wagner, Messiaen didn't even call this an opera, but, Wagner called his operas music dramas. Messiaen called this, I think he just called it a spectacle. But I really do think that Messiaen is a top 10 composer, in my opinion, partially due to his
fascinating music, thorny as heck and dense.
Well, he basically invented. I mean, he didn't invent serialism, but he did not invent serialism, which is, of course, everyone's favorite artistic movement. Most people are really attracted to the music of Messiaen because of the tone color of it all. Messiaen was very synesthetic and very religious, and so he associated certain sounds and chords with specific colors. He was also obsessed with things like birdsong and would often write birdsong into his score, especially in this opera.
An opera about a man who was sainted for talking to animals.
Exactly, birds specifically.
And if you're familiar with Messiaen's non-operatic music, one thing that you really might know is the Quartet for the End of Time, which similarly makes use of that kind of birdsong technique to tie it into our chamber music score listeners.
In any case, this opera is really kind of a magnum opus for everything Messiaen was trying to do. And he really wanted to find a baritone that would dig in deeply to not just the psychology and the history of Saint Francis, but also someone who could really embody that in a very physical way. Messiaen actually took José van Dam with him to look at a bunch of frescoes by Giotti di Bondone for precise poses and gestures that he would use in the opera. And it's really an interesting opera because it's so long and so repetitive and so lacking in traditional drama, right? It reminds me of like a Pelléas et Mélisande, or even like the Philip Glass Akhenaten that they did a few years ago at the Met, and I think they just finished a run of at LA Opera.
Yeah.
The Phelan McDermott one where everything is slow, but they indulge in the slowness, and that makes it work. It's that kind of opera.
Where it's like more of a meditation than a drama.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's not like, it's beautiful music, but it's not pretty music. It's dramatic, but it's not histrionic. There's no like moments of like drama where you can like let
no
go and, exactly. But as a result, you're looking for someone with really nice resonance who can be heard over a 110-piece orchestra. You're looking for someone who can embody calm and assuredness. You're looking for someone authority. You're also looking for someone who can, really be not angsty on stage and still have it be compelling. And you have just described José van Dam. I don't think there's anyone more suited to it. And for a while he was, I think aside from Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, I think most of his life he was the only St. Francis performing it. I think in the last 15, 20 years there's been at least one more. But his voice really just works for it. Here's a clip from the 1983 premiere at the Paris Opera, conducted by Seiji Ozawa.
La
He has such a buttery voice that blends into this really strange sound world, which feels very physically resonant. Like even in this live recording, I can feel the resonance sort of pinging off of all of those like very precise colored harmonies and timbres in the orchestra. And it has this overall pleasantness to the sound that really can be heard even when it's at its most gentle, which is a performance that's really, really hard to replicate in an opera that requires so much resources and so much commitment, not just from, the orchestra and the singers, but also from the listener as well. And he has this way of pulling you into it, even in these little small moments, and wanting to like experience that with him. It's a truly remarkable performance, and a lot of people have called it career defining, among, a list of accolades that includes stuff that would define the career of many, many very, very excellent singers.
Yes. And it's a work that I've always meant to dive into and just have not really gotten around to. So maybe this is my perfect opportunity. It was quite a sensation when he premiered this in Paris in 1983, we said. And then there were very high profile revivals of the opera. I mean, imagine doing an opera like this more than once within a 2-decade span.
Yeah.
But they took it to Salzburg in 1992 and then again in 1998. And that 1998 production is the one that was recorded and
under Ken
released.
Nagano.
Yes. Yeah. And notably, he is almost 60 and still sounds like near career best.
Yeah.
Because longevity is a real theme when it comes to Van Damme and his career. That grows both out of like his caution and his more so than caution, which can sound pejorative, but more like judiciousness in terms of what roles he was willing to take on, and how deeply he inhabited characters rather than like throwing away the roles that were comfortable and a good fit for him because he outgrew them in any sense. Like, right. You never felt like José Van Damme was going to outgrow any of his roles, because he said that it took him 50 years and 200, 300 performances of a role like Don Giovanni or The Flying Dutchman, and his understanding of it only deepened.
Yeah.
And so as he's maintaining his tone in like well into his 70s, we mentioned that his farewell to the stage was in 2010 with a production of Massenet's Don Quixote. He said that to him the most important thing is that whenever he stopped singing, people will say, "It's too bad Van Damme is no longer singing," instead of "It's too bad Van Damme continues to sing."
And he was able to say that at the age of like 70 something,
I just want to, and I want to like round out some of the list of roles that we talked about earlier to give a sense of like just how broad we are talking about for a career. Simone Boccanegra, the title role, the Mephistopheles in both the Berlioz and Gounod Fausts, the Berlioz Romeo and Juliet, the Fra Melitone and Forza del Destino, Germain and Traviata, the father in Charpentier's Louise, Oliver, even from New York, making me talk about Louise, the speaker in Die Zauberflöte, Elijah, the title role of Boris Godunov, Janacek's House of the Dead, Claudius, and Hamlet. Enescu's Oedipe, Goulot in Péléas et Mélisande. Like, it is just like, how many languages did we list there? 6 or 7?
He really has such a depth, and like he brings something so meaningful to all of them. You know, there is never a half-assed José Van Damme performance. You never get the sense that he's not giving any less than his all. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think the only artist you can really kind of compare him to is like someone like Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, who is like very committed to, you know, putting everything into every work. But even Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, like especially towards the end of his career, arguably put in too much, at least vocally. And the strain comes through, the tension. But for José Van Damme, that never happens. You know, it doesn't matter if you're listening to him singing something really weird and strange, you know, something from you know, Messiaen from St. Francis. It sounds just as assured as if it's been in the, you know, in the mainstream repertoire and people have been singing it for 100 years. You know, it's a really remarkable voice and a really remarkable career.
And I think there's no better way to close out our tribute to him than to play a selection of what is probably his most non-Messiaen signature role, which is Leporello in Don Giovanni. And I just, as you're listening to this selection from the catalog aria, this is from the Mazel recording and the Losey film, which I was one of the, like, me personally, like one of the first things in opera that I really watched and was like, oh, I think I can get into this. I like the text specificity, the variety of tone, the ease and assuredness of tone, and just the depth of knowledge of this character and how well he brings him to life. Like, I think they really just jump out of your earphones.
Pass or fail? Here's Monday Evening Quarterback.
Hey everybody, it's Oliver Camacho filing a field report from Manhattan, where in about an hour I'm heading into the Met to see friend of the show, Lisette Oropesa, sing one of her signature roles, Violetta in La Traviata. Yesterday, it was friends of the show, Matthew Polenzani, Eileen Perez, and Carlo Rizzi, and husband of the show, Andrei Filonchik, in Madame Butterfly and the Anthony Minghella production, which I have to say, I feel like I've seen it so many times. I've never seen it in person. It's much more effective in the house than I think it is in HD. On Sunday, it was the Laffont competition. I'll get that in just a moment. And tomorrow, my Met orgy concludes with Tristan und Isolde, with friends of the show, Ryan Speedo Green and Lisa Davidson. So, to the Laffont competition, there were 10 finalists, 7 sopranos, 1 mezzo, and 2 baritones. I'll only talk about the winners, beginning with the sopranos, the first of which is Shannon Crowley, who I heard last summer she was covering Anne Trulove in Des Moines' production of The Rake's Progress, and I was really impressed with her in the Young Artist Showcase. She's from the Great Lakes region. She won the Great Lakes region, and she's 25. Her first aria was And True Love, and the second aria was Da Tempeste from Julius Caesar. Another soprano winner was Elizabeth Hanji, 23 years old, from the Northwest region. The first aria she offered was Io son l'umile ancella from Adriana Lecouvreur. And then she concluded the competition with My Man's Gone Now. And the audience loved her. Definitely a very impressive tone quality for a 23-year-old, very young spinto sound. The third soprano to finalize or to win the competition was Korean soprano Song-hee Lee, winner of the Eastern region, 28 years old. She's currently at Juilliard, and she had clearly a claque in the house because she got lots and lots of applause and encouragement from the audience. It seems like she has great Baroque bona fides. She's going on tour with Les Arts Florissants and Les Musiciens du Louvre, among other things. She began the competition with Handel. She sang Tornami from Alcina, and her second aria was the Mad Scene from Hamlet, Ophelia's Mad Scene. And the fourth soprano to win the competition was the one I felt was in the lead from the start, 26-year-old Anna Thompson from Rochester, Michigan. She won the Mid-Atlantic region. She's currently at AVA, and among her credits, she's an alumna of Santa Fe and Opera Theater St. Louis. She started with Thaïs's Dis-moi que je suis belle, and then her second aria, surprisingly, was Hernani in Volami, which I was shocked to hear her offer, but that's what she gave us. Moving on to the two baritone winners, the first of which is Puerto Rican Gabriel Natal Baez, who won the Gulf Coast region, 27 years old. He's currently an Adler Fellow, and he offered Ayavita la Causa to start, and his second aria was Rodrigo, the death scene from Don Carlo. Beautiful tone, very virile sounding, outstanding diction. I was really impressed with him, and I was glad to see him make it all the way to the end. And the other baritone winner, Robert Wente, winning the Central Region, 26 years old, from Munster, Indiana. He offered some bizarro repertoire. His first aria was Captain Ahab, I Must Speak With You from Jake Heggie's Moby Dick. And then his second offering was Johnny Skiki, Ake Tsukoni. Overall, interesting to note that a lot of these finalists have done St. Louis, Des Moines, Santa Fe, or Marola programs. So it's clear, it's confirming what we already know, that getting into these programs sort of is a pathway for many singers to, get in front of the major judges, the major, wheelers and dealers in our industry. So if you can find your way to one of these programs, you are heard by the right people. And of course, you have to have the talent and the technique, etc. I'll say that a wonderful way to conclude the program was Tammy Wilson singing In Questa Regia. She herself is a Laffont competition, when they used to call it the Met Council Auditions finalist or winner. And she came out and she sang In Questa Regia and just slayed. And, it was just really impressive to have her just walk out on stage and deliver, the evening's most thrilling moment. And then she was really charming. She handed everybody their little trophies and stuff like that. The 6 winners was the idea of having 6 winners out of 10 actually felt sort of like, well, if you're the one of the 4 that didn't win, pretty sad, because they all had something to offer. And I don't want to dismiss anybody who makes it this far in this competition. They all got at least $10,000. If you made it to the very end, you got $20,000. Laffont's it was my first time experiencing this. The house was full. The orchestra sounded great. Carlo Rizzi conducted, 21 arias. and all different styles. Not a lot of Mozart on offer. We had 3 Mozart arias in total. Not a lot of bel canto offered. I was surprised to see that much Handel on the program. And it was exciting. I wish there would have been a tenor or 2 or maybe an extra mezzo in the finals. Anyway, I'll be back next week. Thanks for keeping up the show, Weston and Matt. Enjoy.
Thanks, Oliver. Hope you're enjoying TSA over there in New York City. I know I will be next week when I am at the Met for Kaya Sariaho's Innocence, so look forward to my field report on that. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, click follow. On Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. And, while you're at it, find a friend, make them listen, and join the hashtag OBS team. That's sports. The 2-minute drill is right now.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
The Metropolitan Opera's debt rating has been downgraded further into, quote, junk bond status, with Moody's lowering it to CAA1 and assigning it a negative outlook. That's according to Bloomberg News. This comes despite recent gains in ticket sales and an added performance of their current run of Tristan und Isolde. However, amid layoffs and uncertainty around the proposed $200 million Saudi Arabia partnership, the outlook is grim.
Opéra de Montréal and the Orchestre Métropolitain have announced a 3-year artistic partnership, with the OM participating in at least 3 opera productions per season and collaborating on artist training initiatives. The partnership will launch with a concert performance of Der Rosenkavalier, conducted by Yannick Nézet-Séguin and featuring Diana Damrau, Erin Morley, Emily D'Angelo, and Peter Rose.
Tate Modern's Turbine Hall will become an immersive opera exhibit for David Hockney's 90th birthday celebration, featuring sets from his productions of Mozart, Wagner, and Stravinsky operas. Hockney, best known for his landscapes and portraits, created 11 opera sets between 1975 and the early 90s in both London and Los Angeles, his 2 main homes over that period.
In major awards news, the Goethe Listener Foundation has announced the winners of its 2026 International Vocal Competition. Baritone Titus Mutzi, tenor Ben Reisinger, baritone Corin Thomas Smith, and soprano Anna M. Thompson each received a top prize of $12,000. Meanwhile, baritone Hee-Chain Byung took home 2 honors at the Young Texas Artists Music Competition. Byung claimed the gold medal in the voice division, along with the Audience Choice Award.
Crunching the numbers, the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in the United Kingdom has published its annual report about audience trends and interests in classical music, with the news section this year discussing attitudes towards AI in the arts. To recap, last year, 35% of UK adults indicated interest in learning more about classical music, which was up from 20% in 2024 and 11% in 2021. That spike was largely attributed to young adults under the age of 25. In the survey's AI findings this year, a whopping 56% of respondents said that AI would stifle creative innovation rather than enhance it, and 65% said that AI wouldn't work well in classical music specifically.
In trade news, Loughborough Festival Opera has appointed Christopher Ward as its next music director. He takes over for Anthony Nagus, who will transition to the title of Conductor Laureate. Meanwhile, Polish National Opera has tapped Israeli-American conductor Yoel Gamzu to succeed Patrick Fournier as music director next season. Oh, and Billy Corgan, yes, that Billy Corgan, has been elected to Lyric Opera of Chicago's board of directors.
On the disabled list, the Teatro San Carlo faced disruption after a performance of Lucia de Lammermoor last week, when soprano and recent friend of the show Rosa Feola fell ill. After a long intermission and conflicting announcements from the theater, the company, having no cover available for the role of Lucia, canceled the mad scene, prompting audience protests. Feola later explained that she suffered an allergic shock. Similar incidents have occurred recently at other major European houses, which highlights the risk of producing an opera without understudies.
And 3 days later, the Omit returned to an encore. After singing the opening portion of the Mad Scene, soprano Jessica Pratt, filling in for Rosa Fiola, received a huge ovation. In response, Pratt chose to encore the cadenza, earning yet another enthusiastic round of applause.
And on this day, March 26th, we do have some premieres. In 1723, it was Good Friday, and Johann Sebastian Bach conducted the first performance of his Sankt Johannes Passion, also known as the St. John Passion. That was at the Thomaskirche in Leipzig. George Frederick Handel's opera Acis and Galatea premiered in London in 1731. In 1827, Rossini's reworking of his Italian opera Mosè in Egitto as the French Moïse Pharaon premiered in Paris. Daniel Auber's La Sirène premiered also in Paris in 1844. And in 1984 was the first performance of the Just Philip Glass portion of The Civil Wars. That project was an unrealized 12-hour epic opera that was intended to be produced for the Olympic Games of that year. Some births include the Spanish baritone and zarzuela specialist Emilio Sagi Barba in Barcelona in 1876. In 1882, the French contralto Jeanne Gerville Reache was born in Orthez. She debuted the role of Geneviève in Péléas et Mélisande. Romanian soprano Viorica Ursuliaț was born in 1894. She premiered a number of Strauss roles, including the Countess in Capriccio and Arabella, and was also the dedicatee of Friedenstag, along with her husband Clemens Krauss. French conductor André Critin was born in Antwerp, Belgium in 1905. And among his other achievements, he was the first French conductor at Bayreuth from 1955 to 58. Dutch bass Arnold van Mil was born in Skudum in 1921. He sang at the first Bayreuth Festival after the end of the Second World War. And finally, in 1925, it was the birth of French composer and conductor Pierre Boulez in Montbrison.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
That was a bit of Viorica Ursuliaț, who Strauss apparently referred to as the purest of all the truest of all the pure ones, or something like that. She was allegedly his his favorite soprano, other than, I'm sure, Pauline de Anna, his wife.
One would hope.
That was a little clip of her with her husband, conductor Clemens Krauss, singing Es gibt ein Reich from Ariadne auf Naxos, which was her favorite Strauss role, reportedly.
It's a fun role. I totally get it. You know what's less fun is the Metropolitan Opera's credit rating.
Yeah, if you're looking for a good investment opportunity, Moody's doesn't think the Met is one.
Yeah, the downgrade is pretty rough. I think they received their first downgrade a while ago. I think it was 2
years ago.
Really? That just 2 years ago?
If not longer ago than that. The ratings have to do with how good of a bet the analysts think you are of making your money back, essentially.
Yeah.
The lower the rating, the higher potential reward, but also the higher the risk. And that is really what the quote unquote junk bonds are meant to reflect, is just that you will probably not get that investment back, which I don't know how many people who are looking to contribute to the Met are looking for a return on that investment, like a financial return on that investment, but it definitely is going to spook some financial advisors, which doesn't bode well.
There's certainly an increased, I think, problem with so many arts companies, not just the Mets, but any art company really. There's the reliance on the generosity of very wealthy patrons.
The Met has always depended on the kindness of strangers.
One of the problems with that is that there is, in what seems to be culturally, less and less interest from the wealthy classes, not to sound too much like a joyless communist, but there's been less and less inclination to put their money into something that didn't get a return, right? And while I don't think the Met was really seeking out, as you said, people to invest for a profit, it does, not bode well if there was anyone who was considering that they weren't just throwing money into a hole for the good of the arts, It's not good news. It's not great. I'm going to the Metropolitan Opera next week. Oliver's there now. And, hopefully this isn't the last time we'll have the opportunity to do that.
We'll find out which one will sink first, the Met or the current airport infrastructure in the United States.
God, so true. I'm so nervous about that.
What's going to be longer, Tristan and Isolde or the security line?
There it
Another
is.
important question.
Well, in good news, I think good news is that audiences are skeptical about AI in the arts, at least in the United Kingdom. I would love to see, these numbers reflected perhaps even more strongly here in the U.S., but alas, Opera America has not released any survey to that extent recently. These numbers are actually, I think, pretty generally exciting, an uptick pretty strongly of interest in orchestral music at the very least. It's not talking about opera specifically, but a lot of these interest surveys that have been conducted over the last, 4 or 5 years or so does seem to be showing a general upward trend, not just in the UK, but in the US as well. It is kind of fascinating to me to see, going, not to beat a Marty Supreme, a dead Marty Supreme, but like the absolute virality of someone dissing the opera from a very public space, breaching containment out into the general public does seem to indicate that there is something bubbling up at the moment.
And what's interesting to me, if you double click into the second level of some of these survey results, because reading crosstabs is an art form, as my politics podcast will tell me. What's interesting to me is when you're talking about the responses to the question about how many people think AI is going to work well, the classical music number is actually people can more see it being a good fit than they can with things like blues, folk, or soul.
Which is so interesting to me, right?
I do think it has to do with the fact that the cultural perception of classical music is something that is very polished and therefore not very individual. The big link between those art forms like blues, folk, and soul is they're supposed to be about you as a person feeling something real and raw and overwhelming. And people don't think of classical music as being that way. And that I think is really indicative of the struggle that we have with this PR problem is it has to be translated across centuries of performance practice and what this kind of augmented sixth chord means to you in Austria in 1900 versus in 1830 versus in 2026. Yes, that's there in classical music, but I think that if we see the field and let that be the main way that opera and other classical forms of music are discussed, we're not putting up the fight that this art form deserves.
Growing up as a kid, outside of any particular major, East Coast elite, cities, my big struggle growing up was people ever hearing about opera, being shocked that was still a thing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And now we do have people who are interested and who are curious, but a lot of the ways in are not necessarily providing the framework and context that I won't necessarily say the correct framework or context, because I do think that there's a lot of value to experiencing these art forms even with limited knowledge, right? But I do think that there is increasingly people who are listening and experiencing these art forms in a way that is significantly different to the way that, say, you and I might experience it,
And I think about it also when you talk about listeners of opera like you and me, and definitely like Oliver, like the idea of having 25 different recordings of Don Giovanni, like we don't blink at that. Of course you would want every recording because you want to hear like every individual interpretation and what a particular singer, like I want to hear like what kind of a mark a particular singer might leave on a roll. And it's very rare that there's one it's also very rare that there's one recording where every single role is cast as the best casting available.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like different parts of it might be better or worse depending on like who specifically ended up on what record, and like how good does the orchestra sound, and does the conductor take a tempo that like is exciting, or is it Carl Böhm? Just kidding. Just kidding, Böhm heads.
You're coming for the French and Carl Böhm today.
But like what makes it so interesting is that these interpretations can vary so wildly from person to person. And I can also think that makes it scary to dive in. Even if you get to the point where you're wanting to jump into this pool, you're like, you don't want to invest 6 hours of your life into listening to Parsifal only to find out that you picked a clunker, which is why you should always pick one with José Van Damme on it.
Yeah, exactly. I do think it's very interesting. And like, I do think these numbers are generally encouraging, because I do think, you know, it can be tempting for someone who's deeply embedded in the classical music and opera world to like get too hand-wringy about like, oh no, people are listening to these kinds of things wrong. Even though I do get very upset when I see something by Shostakovich on the top 50 most relaxing classical pieces list. I do think that there is it is important to have faith in people to discover these things, because the tools for discovery are there so much more easily now than they were even 10 years ago.
All you have to do is subscribe to Opera Box Score.
I was literally just about to make that transition. Tell a friend. Let's wrap this show up.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. That's how we end the show. Matt Cummings, what have we got?
I mean, first of all, I want to start off with a personal bad call that neither you nor Oliver invited me to come with you on your sojourns to New York City to experience Lisa Davidson in my very bones and tendons. Because you will feel her voice vibrating in the
bones and tendons specifically.
The bones and tendons, don't even bring up ligaments. Forget about them. But at least we got to spend a rollicking hour together, recapping the life and career of José Van Damme, and also reviewing this story that we will put in our show notes for all of our listeners who might be considering looking for you at Tristan and Isolde, but wondering how to prepare. And I would like to read in my best ASMR voice some of the recommendations from this article. In the half-hour break before Act 2, he had lightly caffeinated with a small white teacup of Irish coffee, but his secret weapon, a pack of Zyn, the 6 milligram pillows of nicotine that can be found wedged in many a Gen Z cheek, remain untouched.
You know, Matt, I really felt that in my tendons. That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Get your voice heard and find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. That's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS using the Support the Team tab. Your announcer is Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. And your audio editor is me. The executive producer of the OBS is George Cedarquist. For co-host Matt Cummings, I'm Weston Williams, asking you to continue the conversation about opera with your creditors. We're back with an all-new show next week when we go inside the huddle with Marshall Pinkowski, co-artistic director of Opera Atelier and the stage director of their upcoming production of Pelléas and Mélisande. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more bones and tendons. Join us.